So this is the third in the series that we started 3 weeks ago. Imagine. What is the what? And in these 4 messages, they were really woven around the idea that I wanted to bring to you some of the things that have specifically been a part of my head and my heart for the last long time, really. But focused as best as we can together in this month worth of messages on things moving forward. And so today we're going to hear from a couple friends to this church that have been here, and you've met some of them before in just a moment. But I want to set the stage before they come up here. So the subtext kind of what is the what this week is insulate or engage. When Mayor Dana Ralph was here at the garden the first time that she came, was invited. I had met her once before at another gathering, but she came and there were a bunch of folks up there in the upper portion of what is the Hillside parking plot community garden in conjunction with World Relief. We're going to hear a little bit more about that in a moment. But I went up and I was talking to Mayor Dana for a moment, and I just said to her, I'm so excited that you're here and that you have a chance to be an encouragement to this program. And so we were talking and just kind of discussing things. And I said, one of the reasons that I'm happy for this project and happy to have you here is just that, and this goes back to something when I was a youth pastor. A long, long time ago, I had this idea in youth ministry regarding insulate or engage. And so we were talking with the teens about it and the youth council that I was working with. And I felt like I got this image of something, and I'll explain it to you really quick, but the idea was just that sometimes in a community, the church looks like this, sometimes not always a big building, but this building that is kind of kingdom-like in the sense that we make reference to it in that capacity. But the people around the church see that building like there is, maybe not literally, but more figuratively, like there is a moat that encircles that place. Everybody with me? Moat? Is that M-O-A-T? Okay. Moat. And so for some of you who maybe aren't, that is just like this kind of area, circle of water that goes around the building, and it shields everybody inside that building from everybody outside. And so sometimes I think that we actively do stuff that communicates that concept. You are not welcome here. You don't know what we do inside that building so much. And the truth is, because of those attitudes, whether we say them in those words or not, the folks on the other side of the moat are frankly saying back to us, we don't really care what you do inside there. And it's really not that important to us. So you guys just hang out over there. And so the idea of this meeting that I had with the youth was to say basically, and every once in a while those castles or kingdoms or whatever would throw down that big drawbridge and people could come in. Only certain people, right, could come in and actually see. And so I'm talking with the mayor about this, and I kind of laid out that illustration, and I said, this garden is in essence a way to say, let's get rid of the moat. Let's not do that anymore. And she paused and she looked at me and she said, I'm so thankful for this project. She said, and you don't get into these kind of conversations unless you get into these conversations. And I was fortunate to be having this with the mayor, but I said that to her, and I said, so this makes me really excited. And she said, and this is what she said to me, and some of you may know this already and know what I'm about to be ready to say here, is just that she said, I'm so glad you feel that way, she said, and she was kind of emotional. She said, I learned to ride my bike in your church parking lot. I don't know that I know she was here for our town hall meeting. She's been here for one of the community listening sessions, but I don't know if she's ever attended a service here, but what she and I were talking about was from two different perspectives trying to say the same thing, right? So engagement versus insulation. Sometimes individually we do this. And so the question I have for us as individuals and in this context is, do I look for avenues to meet people, to get across the moat, the figurative one that separates me from other people who are not necessarily like-minded with me in faith or culture? Age? Or do I look for a place to hide? Now, I'm not here to tell you this morning that you should be ashamed or feel condemned because you have hideout tendencies. The truth is I think for the most part, all of the world for the last couple years has had hideout tendencies. So I'm not hitting you like you should feel condemned about this, but I do want to challenge you in that space today. Sometimes it depends upon the season of our life. And I've talked about this, and we'll discuss a little bit more next week, so I'm not going to go too far here, but just generationally, we kind of feel separated. And so in this season of my life, I feel like I want to move into a place where I can just kind of write it out until Jesus comes. I was talking with our former district superintendent. In fact, I mentioned this yesterday at the celebration of life for Edith and Roy Clymer. But our district superintendent likes to say now, as he gets older, and he's I think 7 years older than I am, that he tends to not buy as many green bananas as he used to. But I have engaged in some of that process in myself and starting to think, will this be the last house I buy? Or we buy? No. So, but you move in seasons of life to places where you begin to ask yourself, a house, car, vacuum cleaner. It just moves all the way to green bananas. Right? So some of us, though, get into this space where we say, this season of my life, I'm just, I kind of like the space that I'm in and the friends that I have, et cetera, et cetera. And so we don't push into new relationships. Some of us, it depends on the hour of the day. If you catch me before noon, I'm in a good space. And a lot has been said, or if you catch me after coffee, I'm much better. Amen. Depends on if I'm having a good hair day. I'm really much more, that's not an issue for me anymore. Mostly though, I think it depends upon my sense of what I'm maybe going to share, my sense of hope, my sense of purpose and confidence. That part of me is something that someone else is maybe interested in knowing about. I would just say to you that that's part of them too. And by you initiating sometimes conversation with somebody else on the other side of the moat, it reveals to them that you think what they have to share with you is worth hearing about. I want to suggest to you that we are called to engage and not insulate. And we've talked about that the last couple weeks. I can quote the verses. Last week I read Matthew 28:18 through 20, the Great Commission, and here's another good one. These are in red in your Bible, if you have that kind of Bible. Conversation about salt and light. Verses 13, begin with verse 13. You are the salt of the earth, but if the salt loses its saltiness, how can it be made salty again? It is no longer good for anything except to be thrown out and trampled underfoot. You are the light of the world. A town built on a hill cannot be hidden. Neither do people light a lamp and put it under a bowl. Instead, they put it on its stand, and it gives light to everyone in the house. In the same way, you let your light shine before others, that they may see your good deeds and glorify your Father in heaven. It's tough to do that staying on our side of the moat. But I don't think that our struggle is that we don't know what the Bible says. Conceptually, at least. But I still think that we have come to a place corporately where it is so significant. And I appreciated the applause. I wasn't expecting that, but I appreciate that I feel like the church has come to this place where this is the time that we venture across the drawbridge. In fact, that we torch the moat and get rid of it. But we've just learned through time, and we've kind of used biblical ideas anyway, or concepts, to tell us or teach us that it's maybe not so safe over there, or maybe they don't want us over there. I don't know which we're standing on, but we've kind of used the Bible sort of to teach us things like, and you've heard this before, we should be in the world but not of it. So we should just stay in here and keep warm until he comes. I can understand that. But if I carry that thought process out, I find myself in the cave with Elijah. And y'all know this, and because I've shared this before, but it fits so well I couldn't leave it out. Elijah was not a wimp. That's not what put him in the cave. I don't know that I understand everything that put him there. I've heard lots of messages on it. I kind of want to ask him someday. But he gets to this place in 1 Kings chapter 19. He's having a conversation with God, and he says this to him. He says, I have been very zealous for the Lord God Almighty. He gave him the whole name. The Israelites have rejected your covenant, torn down your altars, put your prophets to death with the sword. I am the only one left, and now they're trying to kill me too. And that was such a good line, he repeats it again in verse 14. And then God responds. And he says quite a bit of stuff, but the point for me, all comes in this first phrase. It's in response to the part, I'm the only one left, and God says, yet I reserve 7,000. 7,000 of my people. And I think to myself, who are these people, and why didn't Elijah notice them? Why didn't he see into those people? And I'm not necessarily relating this next idea to that one, except for some of the wording is the same. I think that we're at a time where we owe the community the opportunity to reject us rather than the reverse. And here's my scriptural reference for that. We don't know where the folks are. We like to make assumptions. And notice I'm saying we, because I do it. But there's this conversation that Jesus has with the rich young man or the rich young ruler. You remember that one? Man, every time I read that, something different comes to me. And this is what struck me in that phrase. Jesus looked at him and loved him. He walks away from Jesus, and he walks away with a kind of a certain emotion around him, which was what? Sad. He walks away sad. But here's what Jesus did. Jesus left space for him to do that, to make his choice, which he did. Walks away sad. But the phrase before that, Jesus looked at him and loved him. So he was seen and he was loved. And seen, I want to take that beyond just the Jesus saw him. I intended to look that up and actually see what the Greek word was there. Somebody can do that for me later if you want to. But there are people on the other side of the moat that just know that when we pass them by, we don't even see them. And that is just, that is twisting in me. Do I respond that way? And then on top of it, loved. Do I even see, let alone love? Jesus did. Dave Gibbons, in his book, The Monkey and the Fish, talks a bit about this concept. And he says, and I was wondering about this in respect to those 7,000 that Elijah misses. He talks about ex-men and ex-women, and you've heard me say this before, and maybe not everybody, but it's his idea that there are people who, in a completely different way, are following the call of Christ in our community, like maybe those 7,000, but we don't recognize it because it's not being done in a traditional fashion. But God has raised them up in certain segments of our community as people who can speak life. And we don't recognize that it's even maybe a spiritual thing that they're doing because we don't see it, like I said, and falling in step with the traditional approaches. So I have a couple friends here today that I think are ex-men that are in the middle of our community, and I'm going to ask you guys to go ahead and come up, and I'm going to introduce them to you in just a second. I'm giving Lucas number 2, and here is number 1 microphone just for those people up there. But X-Men being the idea that, as I said, they are not necessarily serving the church in the traditional sense. They're not a staff person. They're not listed on the back of our bulletin. But they're serving, and we need to, in my mind, hear from them so that we can know better how to pray. I'll start with Lucas here because he's closest to me. So I want to ask you a question and then let you elaborate. But first, how do you, and I didn't tell him this question specifically was going to be a part of the test. But just how do you see the garden fitting into this community, other side of the moat kind of concept, that it encourages people to come be a part from whatever background? How does that fit into the ideas I've shared already, I guess?
Yeah, I think I've had a unique experience recently. We're doing some outreach for the garden, and I was going to some different places of worship. I went to a mosque and went to a Hindu temple, and it was a really interesting perspective to be on the other side of. I walked up and I realized I don't know when people gather here. I don't know what cultural norms I'm violating, or am I offending people, or I felt very like I was walking on eggshells, and I realized that's probably what it feels like for people to come to a church. If they have no context, that you don't come from a Christian background, it feels like there's some moats around that. And so I got to kind of try to step over some moats and see what that experience was like. And it was uncomfortable, but it was really rich to kind of step in and humbling to kind of try to navigate through that. And then on the other side of that, come and look at with a new lens upon the church I attend or here at Hillside. And so I think the project like a garden that just provides this space where we try to give some open place for those that happen naturally, where you can see from a distance maybe what is happening inside of there. I can be here. There's other people maybe in a similar place that I am that are figuring this out. It's just this kind of natural, neutral ground, I guess, where people can gather and then kind of see when the drawbridge is down or when the moat's filled in, and then maybe they can step in through that.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Folks, and I didn't say his whole name. Lucas McClish from World Relief. And there's some events that are coming. One was mentioned already, but can you kind of give us some looking forward kind of stuff that we can be involved with or look forward to seeing take shape out there?
Absolutely. So number one, you all saw it in the announcements. On next Saturday, 9 a.m. to 12 p.m., we're going to be planting some fruit trees outside. So who likes fruit? Come on, that's like an easy, who doesn't like fruit? Sweet, nutritious, all of that. So we're planting a community orchard outside. We did a little bit of that last year. We have a few more to put in the ground still. And just think of this. What you're putting in the ground is an investment for decades to come. People are going to be picking fruit from that outside the church here. It's open for the community for anyone to harvest. You all can pick fruit from that. So put your investment in now and then come back in 3 to 5 years, or keep coming, and then in 3 to 5 years, come and harvest. And so you get to watch that grow. Your children will get to watch that grow. It's an amazing investment. So join us that day, plant some fruit trees, and take care of some other tasks. 2, we currently have garden plots still available for this upcoming year. So if you're interested in that at all, come chat with me, connect with Ev or some of the staff, and they'll connect us together. And it's an opportunity for you to be out in the space, to grow food that you enjoy or love, and to take part in some other cool community events. So we have those available and would love to rent those out because that's what it's for. And then lastly, we'll have some things down the road too, some exciting opportunities. We're trying to look into market gardening and selling some produce and farmers market opportunities. So stay tuned for that, but just keep your eyes peeled.
Thank you very much, Lucas.
What if you have a black thumb? Like you want to grow the food, but you kill everything you touch.
That's impressive. That's a skill. Maybe we can just redirect that to another use. We have BlackBerry that needs to die out there. So, but we offer trainings and classes for folks. So we have people who've never touched anything or killed things when they touch them. And then we offer those trainings with some partner organizations. We have classes. We also just everyone who's growing food out there is super friendly and helpful. Honestly, know far more than me. So just talk with the people around you and they'll help out. So we're trying to make the barrier as low as possible, and it's just a learning place.
You can also, I'd say this too, you can partner with somebody whose thumb is a different shade than yours. That's, so maybe you can be the wealthy benefactor for someone who... Anything else that you wanted to touch on as far as events?
I think that's it for now. And
okay.
Also, I was just going to say, World Relief, we have a lot of other areas too. So if you're interested, I know you guys at Hillside help with the sewing program and a plethora of other ways. So if you have any other interests or skills or abilities, you just want to know how to serve our newest neighbors in the community, then chat with me. I'm happy to connect you further.
All right. Thank you, Lucas. You can go ahead and sit down if you like. So this gentleman now to my left is Chief of Police for the City of Kent, and a man of faith. And I've had the privilege in the last couple months, well, beyond that, I guess, year plus. He was also here with our first town hall meeting. And with several other folks on the panel. I think we can even find that somewhere on our Facebook menu or something. But he was here for that, and then I had the chance to go to a Faith in Blue gathering, as well as a Kent Chamber of Commerce meeting. And so I've heard him share. And I should say this too, he has also been interviewed by our own Grantley Martelli on his Above the Noise podcast. And Grantley will help you find where that's at if you have a question. There's a whole bunch of wonderful interviews on that, on what he offers there. But Chief was interviewed. He's a person of faith. And so I'm really happy to have him here for an abundance of reasons, all that I've mentioned included. But I wanted to start because at the Faith in Blue gathering that I went to, and throw a couple questions at you, there was some legislation that he and the other, working in conjunction with the mayor and city council, are really prayerfully hoping can come into play to help you guys do your job the way you want to be able to do your job. And maybe you could elaborate on some of that.
Sure. I do want to start by recognizing Pastor and thanking you for your leadership and engagement. These are trying times, as they always are, and our churches have really elevated our city, and they've particularly, I feel, have elevated our department, and I'll talk about that in a little bit. But let's go across the moat and let's walk into the world. We are in the middle of legislative session. This week is a critical week in that all of the proposed legislation has to make a certain deadline by Friday, or the legislation does not continue forward, right? They call it the bill's dead. So Friday is a deadline. All bills must come out of committee. There are several priorities for the city, but the two that we were focused on in our Faith in Blue discussion had to deal with the Blake decision. That's your possession of narcotics that came down from the state Supreme Court in 2021. And the second one has to deal with our ability for vehicle pursuits is another big one. On the Blake decision, what happened was in spring of 2021, our state Supreme Court ruled that the possession of narcotics law was unconstitutional. It had to do with a technicality about knowing whether or not you're in possession of narcotics. And literally the case was a woman had a little bit of meth in her pocket and was able to through testimony, convince the court that she was unaware that was in her pocket. So we didn't knowingly have, yes, that literally is the case. You can look it up. So the legislature was in a scramble. We had basically that ruling made it legal to possess narcotics, all of them. And you know what fentanyl right now is doing to our communities. It's the third largest killer of adults in our country. Okay, and it's a serious, serious deal. So legislature put together what they called the Blake Fix in 2021. They moved the charge from felony to misdemeanor, but they made it so that officers could not make a physical arrest for that. And let me be really clear. We are not trying to arrest our way out of anything. However, these are very powerful drugs. The notion that our officers would show up and provide a resource pamphlet or bring a caseworker to them and that they would just automatically say, yes, I want service, is not working. It is not working. We knew it wasn't going to work. If it were easy to get off of these drugs, lots of people would be doing it, okay? I have family members that are afflicted by drug use all their lives. They need help, they need intensive help, and sometimes they need help that they won't take necessarily right away, okay? So we lost our mechanism, believe it or not. One of the main mechanisms to get people healed was to actually hold them accountable. It's a crazy notion, but it's true. So for the last year or so, almost 2 years now, we have not enforced drug laws the way we used to. So what the city is proposing this year, and we're very strongly supporting, and I've already testified and will testify in Olympia this week, is that we want to change it. Let's make the requirement, give the officers the tools to make the contact, have the ability to arrest, but make it mandatory that that charge get automatically deferred if a person will go into treatment, okay? And our proposal, and like I said, we don't know if it'll make it out of committee, but our proposal goes a further step. If you successfully complete the program, then we want your record expunged. We want it wiped out. Okay? There are huge challenges because we don't have all the resources we need for treatment. That the state has to work on that, and they are working on it. There's a lot of talk about receiving centers and all of that, but that's where we are at, right? The city of Kent, the Kent Police Department, we're not trying to criminalize people that need help. But I am telling you, the voluntary route is not working, and it will not work. Yes. They have to enroll, and there's an ongoing monitoring and accountability through the court system.
He's going to hang out for a little bit after the service, so if you have a question that's burning and you are feeling like, In fact, in order for us to kind of keep going all the way through, that'd be probably the better time to ask some of the questions. And he said he's willing to stick around. I wanted you to, because I don't think most people understood this either, that the police force in Kent suffered a huge loss of staffing. And if you could speak to that, and then what happened, and then where you are today.
Absolutely. Let me start with the praise report, is what we'd call it at our church. I go to Motion Church in South Hill. All right, so praise report. Last time I was here, this congregation prayed for our city, our leaders. You prayed for our department and our officers, and you prayed for me, which I very much appreciated. So when we get to the discussion about what can you do, that's at the top of my list. At the time that I spoke, we were down 31% of our uniform patrol force, 31%. We lost more officers in 2021 than we did the previous decade, okay? And it had to do with all the things that were going on. I am very pleased to announce we are full. We have hired every spot. We are that, we are kind of the unicorn right now in law enforcement. That mythical creature that you hear about but never see, that's us. I love walking into my chief association meetings. I'm on the executive board for the state sheriffs and police chiefs, and I love walking in there like a proud rooster. We have done what nobody's been able to do. At the same time, we were talking about elevating our diversity and being more representative. I'm very proud to present we have elevated our diversity hiring by 70%. We have increased our women in law enforcement by 125%. And because we have hired 38 people since the January of 2022, that represents 45% of the makeup of my department right now, of the people we just hired. So great news. I'm a little terrified because they're all like 20-something, and they don't know what to do, but they're great people. We always hire exceptional people, and it's all the credit to my team. So there's the praise report. So we're in good shape. Now, you're going to also hear me say this department needs to be a lot larger, so we need to be at 195. Right now, per capita, compared to our comparables, we are at the bottom in the region. When I took over as chief in 2018, that was one of my first presentations, is we need more officers. That is true today. And that hasn't. So, very busy city. I don't have to tell you folks about the crime. I just want you to know, as your chief, it really bothers me. This is my city. You are my people. And so there is good news. Once I get all these new officers trained, we can get back to the realm of some of the community-based problem-solving efforts, because we are chasing our tail right now, just going call to call to call, and not really out there in the way that I want to be, so that we don't have to respond to tragedies. So we're working on it.
Thank you. One of the very interesting things to me at the Faith in Blue conversation that day too was the program that you have begun in partnership with World Relief and some of the training of these new officers. Can you explain that a little bit?
Yes, very strong partnership with World Relief, and I really want to thank them, because they're the only ones that would take us on. So back in 2021-ish, we were really trying to find innovative ways to diversify our rank and file law enforcement officers. What we looked at was our data, and what we recognized is 78% of the candidates did not come from the underrepresented communities that are throughout our city. And so we were hiring good people, but they came from places that didn't look like Kent, cultures, and all of this. So the question was, how do we close that gap? If you've heard me speak, you've heard me say that at the heart of my leadership is the servant leader model. That's what I demand, that's what I try to live, it's what I hire. And so what we did was we modeled a program that I used to be involved with years ago, a federal program called Police Corps, and we decided that we were going to bring new officers in, and before they did any police training, before they even got their uniforms, we were going to place them with community-based organizations and just have them serve. Just serve, right? And the vision initially was to be at World Relief, to be at the Y in the youth programs, to be at the food bank, to be at SCAC helping our disabled employees, to be at our senior living homes. And so partnering with Tina Orwell, Representative Orwell, who represents Kent, by the way, she put together a federal program. You brought in the University of Washington to do a study, and we just completed our first study. The goal was to graduate 9 candidates in the first year, but because we were in a hiring wave, we have now graduated 32 from this program. So where World Relief comes in is they are the only organization that had the structure and infrastructure, and we're working on expanding. They have housed all of those graduates. So if you think about going back to the Taliban taking over Afghanistan, all the refugees came here. It was Kent police officers going out, picking people up at the airport, taking them to medical appointments, helping them go to get enrolled for housing. When you look forward at the work that's going on now with World Relief leading the way with the earthquake in Turkey, our officers will be helping to process donations and put things out. Their first view of Kent and the people they serve comes from serving, not enforcing. And I think that's going to pay off long dividends.
So one last question, then I'm going to let you go ahead and sit down, and then we're going to call these guys back up at the end to pray for them. Does that sound okay? So 32 have gone through that program. How many hours does each of those work through in culture training and everything? How long is the World Relief program?
It's 2 months. 2 months. And what's notable about that is we were in a position where we had to get these new officers on the street yesterday, right? And trust me, there were some eyes raised at me when I said, yeah, we're going to take them for 2 months and do nothing but have them serve the community. And that's what it takes. It's not.
That's awesome. Thank you, sir.
All right. Thank you.
Appreciate it. Take that. So last week, in my sharing, I said that there were 3 L's and an R. And then I got texts that I forgot the last L. And I did. So, and I'm going to share it really quick here. I'm not going to go into detail. You'll have to go back to the message last week to know exactly how I fleshed out each of those. But it corresponds a lot with the approach that I feel like we need to make in correspondence with getting over the moat in our community, or get rid of the moat in our community. But in a personal context, in conversation, if you remember, the first L was listen. And the second L was learn. And then it was an R. After we've listened and learned, we may need to respond to what we just learned in some capacity. In fact, most of the time we do. It might mean to make some change of some sort in how we interact with people that we have just been in conversation with. And then in parentheses next to that R, I had the word repent, because sometimes it may require that too. And let's not be ashamed of that. That's a good Christian word, folks. And then the last L is live into. Live into. I've listened, I've learned, and responded or repented, and now I just need to begin to find ways to live into for the rest of my days all that I have come through to that point. So I've been working on this idea too in respect to the community, the insulate or engage. And so here are some things, and Chief of Police didn't have any idea that this was what was coming, but it fits so well into the things that he has suggested. So in your outline for today, there's, again, actually there's 4 L's, but the first couple things are exactly the same. That we become a church that is listening to our community. That we develop on purpose ongoing difficult dialogue opportunities in order for us to hear and understand. And that's, as I've been sharing with you, that's part of the reason why in this coming Friday we have another community listening session. that we'll be hosting over there in the Cafe Fellowship area. And these conversations then, as I already said, will approach greater understanding of what different generations and different cultures are pushing into this season of the existence of the church. Whether we want to be invested in that or not, it's coming, and it's time for us to say, let's enter into. Let's not be governed by that concept that we think in the world but not of it means, and that we retreat and we stay out. We don't get to hear things like we've heard today if we retreat. And so we openly determine to listen, be a listening church. And then the second thing is be a learning church, which again relates exactly to that individual conversation. But we commit to this as a church culture. And I realize even when I say these things that there are some people who are like right away. And somebody will come up to me after the service and go, "Oh man, that was so great. I am all in." And then some people will kind of go, "I need to really think this over for a bit." And that's okay. That is okay. If you have questions, like I said, I'm open to talk about it. But not everybody moves right into new ideas or new ways of thinking. But in respect to learning, kind of from a couple different directions, learning that we could provide some workshops and things for the community, similar to stuff that we're already doing or that World Relief has partnered with us in doing. But even beyond that, dialogue about what we could do to provide help for families in our community, even beyond the things that we've partnered with in World Relief. I'm interested in talking to people about that. The one thing I would challenge you with is if you have this idea burning in, because I get these a lot. "Pastor, I think that we should do this." And I'll be like, "Okay, who's going to lead that?" "Well, I don't know. That's your job now." And those are, I'm not going to just throw away that idea, but the truth is I heard this said at the workshop last week. The old standard used to be 20% of the people doing the work of the church. Man, most pastors would take that today. 20% stepping up to do things like leading significant ministry opportunities. But so listening, learning, and then linking with community programming, and we've already talked about that today, so I'm not going to go into too much detail here, but I roughed out this drawing of what this kind of looks like and where it goes to that I think steps right into what Chief Padilla said. Thank you for that bridge to walk over. And so there's an illustration that we have, and there you see it. So the investment that we make into the community of listening, learning, and linking with them. So we're not retreating from investment into our schools, into our police department, into the Chamber of Commerce, into whatever it is that's been made available to us. We're not retreating from that. We're looking for ways to get invested. That's the linking concept. And here's kind of the secret to me. And I almost kind of, after I saw this, Janelle, I thought about, I almost wanted the one in the middle. So you see the space where all those circles overlap. And so if you kind of looked at that, I don't know what you call that shape, but it's where all of the circles overlap. And then it says leading there. I almost wanted that to be small, and here's why. In order that it would correspond with this portion of Scripture, Mark 10, verses 42 through 44. It says, Jesus called them together and said, "You know that those who are regarded as rulers of the Gentiles lord it over them, and their high officials exercise authority over them. Not so with you. Instead, whoever wants to become great among you must be your servant. Whoever wants to be first must be slave of all." And that was what I think you were thinking on when you said that. So if we can go back to that slide for a second. So the leading becomes invitational because our community has said, "I have seen you invest. sincerely, with no strings attached. And what I think will happen, in fact, I know it will because it is that if we do it in a fashion that is servant-led, then they will ask us to lead in different things. They will help us with the mission of the church. I've seen it. I remember the day that Lucas was out in our garden with Brenda Fincher, a member of the city council, and two people from the utilities department. And I was just watching Lucas and Brenda Fincher as they encouraged the utility department to give our church a break for the cost that we have each month in utilities. And I'm not saying that I'm not saying that at all to brag. I was just I'm sure Lucas didn't notice, and I'm sure none of them did. But I was wobbly-legged because I was seeing this concept being played out in front of me. That when we're actively stepping across the moat and doing the things that we're supposed to be doing, not all the time, but there's going to be times where they ask or support us in what our mission is. So the final L, like I said there in your outline, is leading. I'm going to go ahead and ask the worship team to come up here, if they would, and we're going to finish up for today. Lowercase l, like I said, or smaller. I've heard it said something like this before. It's amazing what can happen when no one cares who gets the credit. So when the church just goes about being what has been laid out, I think, for us in Scripture, what Jesus called his disciples toward in those verses in Mark, then good things happen. A couple quotes here in wrapping this up. This is from 1968, and I know I've read this one before. I don't think the second one, but 1968. So all the people, I was 7. Some of you were older than me. A lot of you weren't here. But I wanted a quote in here that wasn't like from the last 2 years. So this is from Jess Moody. He was a pastor, I think, in Florida at the time. One of the first ever mega churches. But he wrote a book called A Drink at Joel's Place. And he called the church in some of the same ways that we're talking about right now. And in that book he said this: the church has been concerned because the world isn't impressed with us and will not sit up and take notice. The church needs to be informed that the world is not obligated to pay attention to us, but I am convinced that they will when we deserve to be heard. Gary Haugen, CEO of the International Justice Mission, wrote this: fear, say that with me, fear, one more time, fear is the force that strips us of our dream and replaces it with a preoccupation with self. Let's stand. So this is, you heard me a couple weeks ago say there's the should because, and there's some of that in here. But I hope you receive this message this morning as this is a can buy. We can do this. We can do this. There's one. We can do this. By letting the Holy Spirit shape us in the way that he already wants to. It's that simple. Not pushing back against that, but engaging in the way that he can help us to engage. We're going to sing this song.